To shift or not to shift? That's one of the hottest questions in the American trucking industry today. Which is better, the manual transmission, the old style, or are the new automatics truly better? If you have an automatic truck, does that make you a steering wheel holder? If you still prefer the stick, does that make you a dinosaur? We're going to discuss that today and go through some of the pros and cons and talk about which one turns out to be the better choice. Speaking of automatic and standard transmissions, and you guys know I like these small trucking companies, but here's an outfit called Great Lakes Cold Logistics. They're out of Warrendale, PA, just outside of Pittsburgh. They've been listening to the drivers and the new guys, and now they have both standard and automatic transmissions trucks. They've got a great benefit package. They've got that old school family feel. It's a family-owned outfit. Check them out at drivegreatlakes.com. One of the biggest complaints that experienced drivers like myself have is with an automatic, we feel a certain loss or sacrifice of control of the truck. And it's not just me. I've talked to many of my friends my age that feel the same thing, that when you're on a slippery slope or an icy curve and the truck is pushing you downhill, you feel a certain squeamish feeling in the seat of your pants because the truck is still pushing forward with the transmission. You've got all that weight behind you pushing and controlling you. And when you get into a slippery curve, for instance, there's a tendency or a feel the truck wants to jackknife. It wants to keep pushing and get out of shape. That is an uncomfortable feeling for an experienced driver, and all sorts of them have it. There's no doubt it exists, but maybe that's just part of the learning curve, and the new guys never seem to complain about this, but I don't know if it's just because they don't have enough experience to sense it or not. But that is a big factor with automatic transmissions. One fellow wrote into us, and I quote, "I want to see you come off of Crazy Train in Northeast Washington with 100,000 pounds of log in the snow and ice with an auto shift and get down the 14 miles of logging road and still manage to keep the rubber side down." Good comment. One of the biggest beefs I hear from a lot of guys, and I'm surprised by this, are the fact that the manual transmissions are hard on the knees. Now, I've been double clutching and shifting for 45 years now, never had any problem, and I use my knees to walk and do everything like everybody else. So I can't imagine the switch to an automatic transmission would save your knees that much that it would make that big a difference, but some guys swear the automatic is easier on their knees. Certainly in a high volume traffic situation that would be the case, but I suggest that, if you're having that kind of trouble with your knees, you should see a doctor. Many experienced drivers have pointed out that for a new guy, there is a lack of attention that they have to pay to the road when they've got an automatic transmission. For a new guy, it's a give and a take. For a new guy having to learn a standard transmission, definitely that takes some of his attention. So there's a pro in the fact that a new guy doesn't have to concentrate so much on shifting the gears. However, when they get the thing up and rolling, and they're just gliding across the highway in gear with an automatic, people have pointed out that there's a tendency for newer guys to look around and become less focused on the drive and start doing things like playing with their cell phones and such. It takes away from the attention that they're paying on the drive. A lot of new guys will point out that an automatic will accelerate faster than a standard transmission. And certainly that's true. I don't see the advantage to quicker acceleration for an automatic over opposed to a standard, but a truck isn't a drag race machine. The idea is to get the thing up and rolling and get down the road. I don't consider it a big factor whether it takes me a minute to get to 60 miles an hour or 45 seconds, but certainly the automatic accelerates faster. Now here's a big one, the learning curve. Certainly there is less of a learning curve with an automatic for a new driver, and that lends itself to why these big carriers like the automatics, because it gets the new drivers in the seats sooner, faster. They're not having to suffer through this learning curve. It's easier to get the license, and that's what the big carriers are all about. As an old guy, I feel that everyone should learn, if they get the chance, to drive a standard transmission as well. It certainly gives you a better feel of the truck, in my opinion, and that's just part of big rig trucking. You can't be a gear jammer with an automatic. Let's talk about something else that's a big deal. It's the fuel mileage. Now, early on, the early automatic transmissions did not get as good a fuel mileage as an experienced driver could get with a manual transmission. That has changed. The automatics have gotten better and better to the point that they do always now get better fuel mileage with the truck with an experienced or an inexperienced driver. And certainly fuel mileage is a huge factor to consider. Let's talk about the maintenance and repair factor here for a minute with these transmissions. When a standard transmission had trouble on the road, pretty much any shop could get you up and running again, because 99% of the time they just needed to replace the clutch. It was a fairly easy job to do. Almost any competent diesel shop could do that, and you could be in and out in a day and on your way again. With the automatic transmissions, when you break down, you just can't have any shop working on the thing. It's got to go to the dealership where you got, that brand of truck, whether it's Freightliner or Kenworth or whatever, whoever's transmission it is, you've got to go to one of their dealership shops, and a repair on one of those can be very, very costly and very, very time consuming. And time isn't always something you've got a whole lot of when you've got a hot load on the trailer like produce. Here's a big one. With a standard transmission, if you get stuck in snow or mud, you can rock the thing back and forth to the point where you can usually get yourself out of trouble and get back on the road again. Not so much with one of these automatic transmissions. They're not as good in crappy weather or ugly, sloppy roads. And yeah, you can rock them to a certain extent, but rarely can you get it to the point where you can free it up from the situation that it's in. So certainly, the standards are way easier to rock the truck when you need to. Here's one that's a particular pet peeve of mine. When we're coming into the dock, when we're backing in, we like to feather the clutch, and that way you bump the dock, you hit it softly. With an automatic transmission, you can't feather the clutch. There is no clutch. You just hit the dock in gear, then you got to slam on the brake to keep it pinned against the dock. It doesn't feel good, and sooner or later you just know that that's got to be hard on the transmission. And everybody on the dock thinks, holy crap, where did this guy learn to drive? Finally, whether to spec an automatic transmission if you're an owner-operator is a very tough call, because they're more expensive to spec, they're certainly more expensive to repair, and are you really going to get the advantage, the added worth, your return on your money, because they get that much better fuel mileage? And you've got to weigh that too against where you can get repair. And if you've got to tow the truck 500 miles to the dealership, there's unknown costs in there that all you can do is take a crapshoot, roll the dice if you're an owner-operator, and hope that it works out the way you want it to. One fellow wrote into us, and I quote, "It's like the difference between wearing shoes with laces or wearing shoes with Velcro. Both work just fine. In fact, Velcro might be better in some cases, but do you really want to be the guy wearing the Velcro?" Quick story here. Back a number of years ago, when I was leased onto a chemical tanker place, there was an owner-operator there that bought a brand new Volvo with an I-shift automatic transmission. Now, bear in mind, this was a number of years ago, and I guess Volvo didn't really have the transmission, have all the bugs out of it yet. But on a chemical tanker, the loads slosh and surge back and forth, and sometimes it can be pretty violent. There was enough slosh and surge hauling chemicals that this fellow, and we were in the mountains all the time, this fellow ended up going into the shop for repair at least 8 times that I can recall on a brand new truck. And every time it was down a couple of days when he was in there. And every time it went down, they either sent another truck to rescue the load or the load was late. But either way, there wasn't a whole lot of customer satisfaction involved in the loads that this guy was pulling. And it wasn't his fault. He had a brand new truck. But still, the downtime and the repair was costing him money, huge money. Last I heard, that guy had given up the truck. because of all the problems he'd had with it. At the end of the day, it truly just comes down to personal preference. Myself, I'm always going to prefer the standard transmission. Smart Trucking did a poll to see which you guys preferred. 68% of you said that you preferred the standard over the automatic transmission. I strongly recommend that if you do drive an automatic and you're new at this, and if you get the chance, take the time and learn how to drive a standard transmission, because you really can't be a true gear jammer unless you know how to do that. Take care, keep the rubber side down, and we'll see you on the back.